It wasn't planned. There wasn't a moment where I thought, I'm gonna do this now. It just happened. And that might be the worst part. The randomness of it. The total lack of meaning. We were having dinner at this small Italian place he'd been wanting to try. Nothing fancy, but it had string lights on the patio and paper-thin menus that felt romantic if you squinted hard enough. He was already talking about coming back in the fall, when the trees would turn red. I remember thinking that was sweet. I also remember feeling nothing when he said it. We'd been together 3 years. Stable, kind, predictable. He made me coffee in the mornings, always kissed me before leaving the room, always answered my texts within minutes. We didn't fight much. We didn't laugh much either. But maybe that's normal. Maybe that's just what love becomes after a while. The waiter came, took our drink order. He got the house red. I asked for sparkling water. He teased me gently, said I never let myself relax. I smiled like I always do. Said something like, I just don't feel like wine tonight, even though I wasn't sure that was true. There was a man at the bar. Alone. Dark shirt. Sleeves rolled to the elbows. Eyes that moved just enough to let me know he noticed me. Not in a sleazy way. Just a flicker. A quiet hello without the sound. I saw him. He saw me. I don't know why that mattered, but it did. My boyfriend was talking about work. Someone at his office made a mistake on a budget sheet, and now the whole project was off schedule. I nodded at the right places, but my attention kept sliding. My eyes wandered. The man at the bar didn't look at me again. He didn't have to. He already knew I had. At some point, I stood up, said I was going to the restroom. He smiled, kept talking, didn't even look up. I walked past the kitchen doors, past the hallway with the crooked mirror and the mop bucket left in the corner into the bathroom that smelled like cheap lavender soap and something damp underneath. He was already there. I didn't speak. Neither did he. There was no build-up, no flirtation, no plan, just movement. Heat, hands. My back against the wall, breath I didn't know I was holding, and a silence that screamed louder than anything I'd heard in weeks. It didn't last long. I wasn't even fully present for it. My mind had left the room before we'd even started. After, I stared at myself in the mirror for maybe a minute. Fixed my hair. Wiped the corners of my mouth. Reapplied lip gloss with a steady hand like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just imploded something. Quietly. Deliberately. For no reason at all. I walked back to the table. He was still there, smiling, hands folded, thanking the waiter as the plates arrived. I sat down, picked up my fork, said, "Smells amazing." And he said, "You were gone a while. Everything okay?" I looked at him, nodded, and said, "Yeah, just a line in the bathroom." Then I started eating. He didn't notice anything different. Not in the moment. Maybe later. Maybe in some subtle way. The way animals feel storms coming before the sky changes. But right then, he was just happy I was back. He poured me water, asked if I wanted to try his lasagna. I said no, smiled, asked him about his sister instead. She was moving to Denver. That's what I remember. That, and the way my hands didn't shake once while I cut into my ravioli. The man from the bar was gone. I didn't see him leave. Didn't look for him. He had stepped out of my life the same way he'd stepped into it. Without noise, without meaning, like a shadow you don't even realize is missing once it disappears. I told myself it didn't count. That it wasn't real. That it was just a moment. A stupid, impulsive, empty moment that lived in a bathroom and died as soon as the door closed. But the body remembers. The lie remembers. It sits there under the surface like a bruise you can't show anyone, but still feel every time you breathe. When we got home, he poured us each a glass of wine, even though I'd said earlier I didn't want any. I took it anyway. Sat next to him on the couch, legs tucked under me, pretending to be tired, pretending to be relaxed, pretending I wasn't hearing the echo of someone else's voice in my head, even though that voice had never spoken out loud. We watched a movie, something forgettable. He fell asleep 20 minutes in. I stayed up, watching the credits roll over his closed eyes, his soft mouth, the part of his shirt that had come untucked while he slept. I used to find that endearing. Now it just made me feel like I was watching a stranger pretend to love me. Or maybe it was the other way around. The next morning, he made pancakes. Said it was a small Saturday, something he liked to say when we both had the day off and the world outside was still quiet. He kissed me on the forehead, handed me coffee with just the right amount of oat milk, told me he had a surprise planned, a day trip to the coast. I smiled, leaned into his shoulder, said he was the sweetest man alive. And I meant it. That's the sick part. I still loved him. I still do. Even now, telling you this, I can't erase the softness I felt for him. But love isn't always clean. It doesn't always protect you from yourself. Sometimes it just makes the betrayal quieter. We drove for an hour, talked about things we'd already talked about a dozen times before. Whether we should get a second dog, where we'd live next year, if we should try to do Christmas with both our families this time. I answered all of it like I hadn't already broken something inside that couldn't be unbroken. And he never looked at me like anything was wrong. He never once asked what really happened in those 10 minutes. Because to him, I had just gone to the bathroom. Just like any other night. Just like any other dinner. But I wasn't the same girl who walked away from that table. And I never would be again. For the first few days, everything stayed quiet. Not just outside, in the house, in the relationship, but inside me too. As if the moment hadn't fully landed yet. Like I'd tossed a stone into a lake, but the ripples hadn't reached the shore. I kept waiting to feel something sharp. Guilt, panic, disgust. But instead, there was just this dull hum. A kind of emotional static, like a radio that couldn't quite find its station. He kept being himself. Sweet, thoughtful, unaware. I watched him move through the apartment like someone playing a version of a husband he hadn't quite become yet. Folding laundry with headphones in, singing off-key in the shower, reading recipes out loud while holding a spoon like a microphone. It should have made me feel safe. It used to. But now it made me feel like a guest in my own life. Every time he touched me, a hand on the small of my back, a kiss on the cheek, his thumb brushing the inside of my palm. Something in me recoiled, just slightly. Not because I didn't want him, but because I couldn't forget who else had been there. I couldn't unfeel it. I couldn't make my body forget what it had done, no matter how much I smiled and leaned into him like I was supposed to. The worst part wasn't the lie. It was how easy it was to keep telling it. We had dinner with his friends that Friday. Casual. Takeout, wine, some dumb board game they loved that I always pretended to enjoy. I wore a sweater he liked, tied my hair up the way he once told me made me look soft, whatever that means. We sat on the floor around a low coffee table, laughing, joking, passing napkins and chopsticks. And the whole time I was smiling, I was thinking about a bathroom with bad lighting and a stranger I didn't even care about. I watched him laugh at something his friend said, his head tilted back just a little, his hand resting on my thigh. And I thought, you really don't see me anymore. And not in a cruel way. Not that he didn't love me. Not that he didn't try. Just that he was loving a version of me that was already gone. That night, in bed, he pulled me close. We hadn't been intimate since the dinner. I knew it was coming. I saw it in his eyes all evening. That soft look, the fingertips on my waist, the way he lingered behind me when I went to the kitchen. When his hands finally moved under my shirt, I didn't stop him. But I didn't respond either. I let him kiss me, let him touch me, let him believe everything was okay. I even made the right noises, whispered the right words, arched the right way. But I was somewhere else. Not with anyone. Just not with him. I stared at the ceiling the whole time, counted the seconds between his breaths. And when it was over, I got up to use the bathroom, sat on the edge of the tub in the dark, and stayed there for 10 minutes before coming back to bed. He was asleep already, or pretending to be. I lay down beside him and watched the red numbers on the alarm clock tick forward. For the first time, I thought about telling him. Really telling him. Just blurting it out into the dark like a confession no one had asked for. But I didn't, because I knew it wouldn't just hurt him. It would destroy him. And I wasn't ready to see what that looked like. So instead, I buried it deeper. I started going to the gym more, started volunteering for late nights at work, said yes to plans with friends I used to avoid. Anything to stay out of the house longer. Anything to stay in motion. I convinced myself it was good, healthy even, reclaiming space, having boundaries. But really, I just couldn't sit still anymore, because silence had become unbearable. He didn't question it. He liked seeing me happy, busy, said I had a glow. I nearly laughed when he said that. He thought it was self-care. It was self-erasure. One day, I stood in front of the mirror and said out loud, "You cheated." Just those 2 words. Quiet, software. But they echoed. I repeated them. Again, again, louder. And still it didn't feel real. Not the act. The me who did it. Because in some twisted way, I still didn't believe I was that person. Not completely. I believed I'd done it, sure. But the part of me that had always followed the rules, stayed composed, done everything right, she was still holding on. Still waiting for it to all be undone. But it wouldn't be. Because the truth wasn't that I made a mistake. The truth was that something inside me wanted to disappear, even if just for 10 minutes. And it did. He didn't change overnight. Nothing obvious happened. No questions, no fights. Just small things that slipped under the surface, subtle enough that I might have missed them if I hadn't been looking for them constantly. He started asking different kinds of questions. Not suspicious, not even serious, just soft observations, phrased like care. He'd ask if I was sleeping okay, if something at work was stressing me out, or if I'd felt all right at dinner that night. The one where I'd disappeared. He asked it so gently I almost believed it was innocent. I smiled and told him it was nothing. I said I'd just had a headache, that the bathroom line had been long. He nodded. Didn't push. But something behind his eyes held longer than it should have. After that, I began watching him even more carefully than he watched me. Every look, every pause. I was convinced he knew, or at least felt something. Maybe not the truth, not the exact shape of it, but the weight, the shift. Something in me had changed, and he could feel the imbalance. At night, I started sleeping in a t-shirt again. Said it was just cold, though it wasn't. I couldn't stand the way his skin felt against mine. Not because I didn't love him. I did. But because I couldn't forget who else had been there. What I'd done with someone I didn't even know. My body hadn't forgotten, no matter how much I tried to scrub it out of my memory. I became quieter without meaning to. I answered questions with fewer words. I laughed too hard at the wrong moments, or not at all when I should have. I stayed late at work even when I didn't have to. volunteered for errands I would have passed off before, said I needed more time to myself, to recharge. He never argued. He said he understood. But every time he smiled at me, something behind that smile looked tired, like he was waiting for me to come back. One night, while we were watching a movie, he reached for my knee the way he always did, just to touch me, just to feel connected. I didn't flinch. Not outwardly, but I pulled my leg slightly away. It was barely a shift, but he noticed. He hesitated, then moved his hand back to his lap and didn't try again. I couldn't stop thinking about it. That small moment, how simple it was for distance to grow between two people. You don't need a fight, just silence in the wrong places. That night, I lay awake while he slept beside me. I watched the ceiling, thought about telling him, about sitting up in the dark and saying, I need to tell you something, and watching his face as I ruined everything. But I didn't speak. I stayed still, listening to his breathing, wondering how long he'd keep trusting me if I said nothing. The next morning, while he was making coffee, I asked him, almost without thinking, do you think people can come back from betrayal? He turned, looked at me a little confused, and asked, why? Did something happen? I laughed it off, said it was something I read online. He didn't press, but his eyes stayed on me a second longer than usual. Later that week, we had dinner with my parents. Normal, wine, pasta, polite questions about work and travel plans. My mom asked if we'd thought about doing Paris in the spring. He said maybe without looking at me. I said it would be nice. He smiled, and I did too. But there was a pause before it. A delay, like he was waiting to see what version of me was sitting across the table. That night in bed, he didn't reach for me. I didn't turn toward him. We lay on opposite sides in silence. He fell asleep first. I listened to the sound of his breathing and stared at the dark, wondering if we'd already left each other without saying it out loud. He hadn't confronted me, but that was the part that kept me up at night. Not that he might find out, but that maybe he already had, and had chosen not to say anything. Maybe he was waiting to see how long I could live with myself. Maybe he was giving me the same lie I was giving him. And maybe that was worse than anything either of us had done. It happened again. Not in the same place, not with the same tension, but with the same man. I saw him by chance outside a bookstore not far from our apartment. At first, I thought I was wrong. It had been weeks, and in my head he was already unreal. A mistake turned into fog. But no, it was him. He didn't come over, didn't smile, didn't even stare. Just a glance, enough to let me know he recognized me too. I could have kept walking. I should have. But I didn't. I turned back. We didn't talk much. We walked for a while, said a few things I barely remember, ended up at his place. He didn't ask if I had time. I didn't explain where I was going. I don't know what I was trying to prove. Maybe that the first time wasn't real. Maybe that I could still make choices. Maybe that none of it mattered anymore. It was quick, quiet, uneventful. I left without saying goodbye. No drama, no guilt, just silence. I came home, showered, made dinner, kissed my boyfriend like nothing happened. And when he asked about my day, I told him it was fine. 2 days later, I got a message. No name, no picture. Just a link. I opened it, and there it was. A clear, close video of me with him. The second time. No angles to hide behind, no question of what was happening. My breath stopped. Then a second message followed. He knows. I felt cold. Not scared, not exposed, just empty. I tried to think who could have done it. Jess? Tara, Someone else? But deep down, I knew. I knew exactly who it was and who had filmed it. He came home that evening like nothing was wrong. Takeout in one hand, phone in the other, whistling softly as he kicked his shoes off. He smiled, kissed me on the forehead, unpacked the food, asked me to grab wine. I did. My hands were shaking, but I kept them steady. We sat down like it was a normal night. And after a moment, I asked him quietly if there was anything he wanted to talk about. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just looked at me and said, "You thought I didn't know." But I did. From the beginning. I stared at him, not sure what to say. Then he said, "You were gone too long. I followed you. I saw you with him. I didn't stop you. I just waited." I asked him why. He said, "Because I needed to know who I was really with. And I thought maybe it was just that once. But then it happened again. So I reached out to him, paid him, told him that if you ever came back, he shouldn't stop you. Just record it." I couldn't speak. He said, "I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth. You gave it to me." I asked him what he planned to do now. He said, "Nothing. I already did it." He stood up, grabbed his keys, said he'd stay at his brother's for a few days, but before he left, he looked at me and said, "You're not a bad person, but you're not the person I thought you were. And now I can't unsee it." Then he walked out. No yelling, no accusations, no broken plates or slammed doors. Just quiet, clean, final. And I sat there, alone at the table with cold food, a glass of wine I didn't touch, and a video still open on my phone. That was the moment the silence finally made sense.